equality. But it took 100 years to get that far. And by the way of using gender quotas, many countries in the world, especially in the developing world, in post-conflict societies, are today jumping, which we have never done in the Nordic countries. Costa Rica in South America is a good example. 19% women to 34 in one election. Some people call that a gender shock. If you look then at the Americas, you have 23.8, and that is in fact not Northern America. The United States, as you probably know, has a very low women's representation. It's embarrassing, partly because of the electoral system. It's South America. South America is really the region where things are changing. Argentina started by making a quota system in 1991, and now almost all the countries in South America are following suit. Europe, of the 40, you have 21%, 0.6. Sub-Saharan Africa is coming up with 20.4 now. Asia, 18.5. It's also almost around the world average. The Arab countries used to be at the bottom, but notice, not anymore. The Arab countries, 14.9. And this is in fact the area where the women's representation statistically is increasing the most rapidly. And at the bottom we have the Pacific countries. I use the term underrepresentation of women. Women are half the population, but only have 20.5% of all the seats in the world parliament. But you may also turn this around and asking about the over-representation of men. Not just asking why are women underrepresented, but also why are men overrepresented. It is of course the same question, but it's phrased a little different, and you may come up with different answers when you talk about it this way. I'm just finishing together with Professor Monique Leinhardt from Holland, a book which we call Breaking Male Dominance in Old Democracies. This is only about the old democracies where women got the right to vote about around or before the First World War. Later, I would love to write a book about breaking male dominance in new democracies, together with researchers from the new democracies. And we are trying to say, what is it really we are talking about? Well, the first point is the numerical underrepresentation, which we talked about before. But there are many other aspects that have to be changed in order to have the full inclusion of women. And we try to come up with some concepts of what is it. The second point here is what we call the male-coded norms and practice in political life. This is much more complicated. We can start with the House of Commons in the United Kingdom, where women were first time elected in 1918, and there were no toilets for women. That is pretty simple. Today we will talk about male coding in the sense that there is a perception of the politician being of the male gender. That a real politician, because this has been the tradition, is of the male gender. What does that mean? Well, for women, it means that when you come into a parliament where there have been no women or very few women, you are seen as an intruder or a stranger. And for women that poses a lot of dilemmas, because you have to adjust to the system which was created before women had the right to be there. But if you adjust too much, you are being called masculine and not a real woman. And if you don't adjust and try to come in with a new way of behaving and a new agenda, you are saying you're not a real politician. Because it's in the head of people and the voters that politics is male-coded and the real politician is a man, because this has been so traditional. So this is one of the problems that women politicians encounter. The number 3 is what I call the vertical dimension, that the higher up the fewer women, or the law of increasing disproportions, to say it this way. And we see that all over the world, that the higher up in the political system, in the hierarchy, the fewer women. But there are now many exceptions to this. Well, if I should calculate on Jordan, there are 3 women in the government out of 30, this is 10%. Well, this is the same then in parliament, you have 11% women, if I get it right. This is all in the same. But we have, for instance, in the Nordic countries, have examples, for instance, the very famous Norwegian Prime Minister, Gro Harlem Brundtland. He was the head of the Commission of Sustainable Development. She came out in the 1980s with a 50-50% government. At the time, there were no 50% women in the parliament. So we have some examples now that on some points, appointing to positions, you are beginning to have more women. But in general, the fact is that most of the chairs of the parliamentary committees are men, most of those who are in the higher positions, the speakers of the houses, are men in most countries, etc., etc. Number 4 is what I call the horizontal dimension. Only few portfolios are, in fact, open for women. And this is a complicated issue, because sometimes people will say, yeah, women are just ministers of social affairs, or women are just in soft positions. I never use the word soft. I think social affairs are very important. And that's where the money are, in fact, in education too. But there is, if you look around the world, and especially if you look at historically, women started being ministers of social affairs and educational affairs. And again, I think those are important portfolios. But there was a limitation to women. But now we see changes here. You probably saw the pictures of the Spanish Minister for Defense, who was pregnant, right, in the former Spanish government. You have women prime ministers, but not very many. We have women ministers of defense. We have very few women ministers of finance. It's still a very male-coded area. But we have many women ministers of environment. But still, it's a limited. And I think this is one of the things that changes historically, that women should broaden their portfolio. The 5th one is in a system where there are very few women, little consideration for women and gender equality in public policy. And this is, of course, one of the most important things. So the point is, what we're doing in this book is to try to find when are these changing historically, and by which forces. Let me use 1 minute on what I call not the scope of male dominance, but the degree of male dominance. I think it's very important that we have and use some statistic which has some good concepts here. I call it male monopoly when there are less than 10%. I call it a small minority of women when you are between 10 and 25. But of course, this is defined statistically as 29.99. Large minority of women between 25 and 40. And gender balance, I call that 40-60. And I think it's important that we use some good concepts here, because I can hear, for instance, everywhere, or most parts of the world, like in Arab countries and in Europe, now women are in a majority of the graduate students. And I'm very proud of that. I mean, for 100 years, women have been very few in the universities, and now for the first time in history, women are among those students, the graduate students. But then there are some people call, for instance, 60% women, they call it women dominance. You should not do that. I would call that gender equality. Right? Sometimes people say that 60% men, that is gender equality, isn't it? But 62% women, that is women dominance. So I think we have some double standards here, and we should be first very proud of the very many women students, and also we should use the right concept and language here. I limit the word male monopoly or women monopoly to when you only have 10% of the other gender. Going back to the old democracies, now I'm trying to combine the two, the degree and the scope, and see how does this change come about. And I think that the male monopoly situation was when there were only one woman in each party. Each party would say that we don't just need one woman, and they put her in a safe seat, and all the other women were not being elected. Or they put one woman in the government, the obligatory woman. A small minority of women are being accepted in the social portfolios, in this niche, but only there. But then when we come to the next stage, women being 25 to 40, there is a general measure to have women included and to broaden their portfolio. And 40-60 could either be defined as the institutionalization of parity, for instance by gender quotas, or gender neutrality, that gender has no importance anymore. Well, nowhere in the world have we come to that point. I'm not saying that all countries, and especially new democracies, is going the same route. I think there are fast tracks possible for other countries than those old democracies. We see that Senegal has just now come up with 43% women by having a zipper quota system. Costa Rica, Netherlands, Argentina, many other countries are coming up. Now Algeria and Tunisia is having 27 and 35% women. So it is possible not to take the 100 years route, which the Scandinavian countries did. So let me finish by saying that I think that there is a new debate about linking the inclusion of women and democracy. It is very important to look also at how the electoral systems function, not just sitting and wait. I debated that with some of my friends in Tunisia. They said, we demand 50%, and then we'll probably get 30% in parliament. And I said, how are you going to get 30%? Which kind of electoral system are you advising? Which kind of quota system are you advising? Just don't sit and wait. And Egypt, of course, will have a paper on that. Is a disastrous example. Now we are all free and women got 2%. So there are many details. So what I like to do, and what is my conclusion here, I like to combine the very principles of no democracy without the full inclusion of women, and I add other underrepresented groups. But also, and that is one of the tasks of gender studies, to go into the nitty-gritty things about electoral system, quota systems, who control the nomination process, opening the secret gate on nomination, and not sitting waiting. So for us as researchers, this is one of our tasks, to understand how the political system works, to study elections, and also to work on the concepts we use. I think it's very important which kind of language we use. But I'm happy that this new discourse is now a universal discourse, no democracy without the full inclusion of women. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jude. Now we have half an hour for a coffee break, and then we will be back to our interesting useful agenda. Thank you. Professor Annette Brockers. Hope I'm pronouncing your family name correctly. فينا لوموكوفيست. And finally, Professor Ahmad Al-Khalid.